Hello, my friends. I hope you guys can hear me okay. I'm going to do a sound check real quick. Hopefully that the Granite State Club can hear me and that I am showing up on the projector, and then I'll get my slides going here in a moment. But we just want to do a little sound check, 1, 2, and then Steve can send me a message here and say if you guys are seeing me and hearing me okay, and then I will start. But I hope everybody's having a good day, and for anybody who's joining along, welcome, and we're about to start. So should be a good time. We're going to be talking about egg scatterers, and also we'll be talking about egg scattering in the spawning mock type fish as well, and several setups on how to essentially share that, and information all about that is what we should be covering. So let's see here. There might be a little bit of feedback for 1 second. Let me make sure. Let me see if they can hear. Is it working okay for you guys?
We can see you on there.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you a little bit, but we're gonna transfer it to another laptop so that we can hear you better, because that speaker's better.
Okay. All right. Cool. All right. So anybody tuning in, we're just getting a sound check done, and I'm speaking today with the fine folks up in the far northeast of the country, of the United States. We got the Granite State Aquarium Club, and we're doing a live stream for them, and then also sharing is caring. So it will hopefully everybody can get in on it. All right. Let's see here. We'll get this up and see how. All right, and then let's see if we can get little me. Come on. No. Let's see. We're gonna full screen there, and then we'll do. All right. Let's see, can we get that bigger too? Yeah. Okay. All right. Let me know when you guys get the speaker ready, and I will begin.
All right. Sorry.
No, it's all good. So today we'll be covering a number of fish, everything from rainbow fish to pseudomagills to CPDs, little cyprinids, danios, microdanios, sundadanios, tetras, and rasboras, and how to spawn them. We're just waiting on sound, so hopefully they can hear me soon.
Yeah.
I can make sure everything's turned up. Yeah. All right. That a little bit. All right. make sure that yeah, okay, that's gonna work.
What's your Facebook name?
So the weather's pretty nice out in Seattle. I'm curious how it is over out east. I heard that it's been hotter than normal. Is that holding true for New Hampshire? Hotter than normal. Holding true for New Hampshire? 118 in LA. Is that true? Is that actually true? LA weather. No, it's 90 in LA. Oh, Louisiana, maybe? Louisiana. Oh.
Our speaker issue should be all set now.
Okay, all right. Let me know if you can hear me enough. Okay, all right. Let me know if is that? Can you guys hear me okay now? Or
good. All set now? Okay, thank you.
And I'll try to speak up. Are we good?
Yep.
All right. All right. So let's fire this up, guys. So sorry for the little feedback there. So hopefully you can see the slides okay and everything. So today we're talking about spawning fish and spawning egg scatterers. Now, I am Alexander Williamson, and you may know me from the channel Fishery, where we put together history and fish. Fishery, which is fish stories. And we have the YouTube channel, but also I am a lifelong lover of aquariums and fish. I have bred around 368, maybe 69 different variety of fish. And we'll go over in just a moment my credentials in breeding this particular type of fish. But if we bring it up, I first just wanted to thank the New Hampshire Club for having me chat with them and present to their club out there. We are about as far as you can get on the American continent away from each other, but it's great to know that there are fish lovers all the way across yonder that are keeping fish and excited about learning new things, as I always am too. All right, so today, spawning egg scatterers is the topic, as I mentioned earlier. And let's see here. Let's see if we can get me up in the corner. There we go. So if I do anything really exciting or I point, maybe you guys will be able to see it. But hopefully the slides will look good regardless of how bad I look. So, you know, everybody gets their first aquariums. And one of the first things they may keep are live bears, guppies, endlers, things like that. And they pretty much reproduce on their own. And that is a great thing, but you know, it's something that a lot of people want to take to the next level. And the next level, I think the very next level, rather than just live bears that have babies with each other in a big, what we call colony or group, would be the kind of fish like rice fish that have eggs, but they will deposit them in a specific place. Now, arguably, you could also say that fish like cichlids or mouth brooders that take care of their babies, those are also great next fish to try spawning. So trying something like, you know, a crebensis, that's another great kind of first fish to try out spawning. But in today's talk, we're going to start with, we'll talk about the mop spawners like rainbow fish and Medaka rice fish, and we'll go over into the tetras. So I have a big old community tank full of tetras, and I have bred a whole bunch of them over the years. I love tetras. I love rasboras. I like nano fish. And my background, officially speaking, is that I have a background in archaeology and history. Now, when you get a background in archaeology, you get a little bit of biology, a little bit of you know, earth sciences, a little bit of anatomy, and then you specialize. So you might get material science, and that's like dating things and all sorts of other, you know, understanding how things erode or how things age, chemistry. I mean, it gets into weather, it gets into all sorts of things depending what you specialize in. And they kind of give you a broad overview early on. So I took that degree and proceeded to do nothing with it for about 15 years, other than keep fish in my free time. You know, I was breeding guppies as a young teenager and selling them on the side just to kind of make a little bit of money. And by the time I got to college, I couldn't keep them in a few of the places I lived, but I still snuck tanks of bettas, and I kept a couple bettas and a couple guppies. So pretty much my whole life, with a year or two missing here and there, I've kept fish. And the last 11 years straight, I've been keeping planted tanks and learning nonstop about all the amazing ways you can keep fish. So we're going to talk a little bit about when you've got a big community tank, how you can colony breed also, which is kind of a naturalistic way to breed where you may have several species even, but you can start off with one species of fish and try to provide a habitat for it. It's very similar to the habitat that it exists in the wild. And by doing so, if you have enough plants and enough cover, such as sticks and rocks and algae even, it can provide you a tank where the fish start breeding on their own. And this may be an experience you've seen when you have a big community tank that's busy, like the one in this picture, and you have one that, you know, it's full of fish, it's full of plants. That is prime territory. The problem is the fry are very difficult to keep in some cases. So here's a little rundown of right now my tally through my Seattle Fish Club, through GSAS, and also on my own. I guess I'm not always the best at recording through them, but usually you guys can see it here on the channel when I've bred something new. But I've bred a total of 29 different tetras, 12 different rasboras, or pseudo rasboras like the Sunda Danios, things like that, the smaller rasboras. Danios, I'm also grouping Danionellas and like erythromicron, which are the Galaxy rasbora, as they're called, or the CPD originally had names that were in the rasbora. So it gets a little confusing, and technically we should probably list them all as just cyprinids. You know, tetras are keratin or keratin. It looks like the word keratin, but it's keratin, and that includes pencilfish and things too. So I've bred 6 different pencilfish, 9 different barbs, cyprinid 16, pseudomcgills and killifish, 28 different ones, and then the rainbows. Those are ones that use the egg mops. At least that's the easiest way to breed them in most cases. And I have bred 23 of those. They're very easy to breed once you get the method down. In fact, I will be able to teach you that method in about 5 minutes. What you're going to have to perfect is your ability to keep them happy. These 2 pseudomcgills here, these Gertrude Aru 2s that are right here, are showing off, and they are two males, and they're basically having it's kind of like the Michael Jackson Bad music video where they have the like knife fight and they hold hands and they twirl around with the switchblades. Well, basically that's what's going on with these fish. But if you ever have kept pseudomagills, the luminatus, the fructatus, or fructata, or the Gertrude, they are all really notorious for doing this. The males spin around and they show off and they put up their fins. And that's something we're going to talk about today too, which is the fact that these fish that we're keeping, they have show and tell. You know, there are things you can learn from a book, but there's also a lot you can learn even if you've never had, even if you had no background knowledge and Google let you down, you have some weird new fish, you can observe them and you can learn a lot. And, you know, males will oftentimes show off for each other, but they also show off for females. And there is a type of chasing that is a little more aggressive that you see sometimes. And usually that's male on male. And then there's also a kind that is a little less aggressive, where it tends to be kind of like a tag game, where it is basically they chase each other and then leave each other alone. And if the fish doesn't have hold on one sec. I'm just reading a note from the club. Running to the stored by a speaker, the projector. Oh, okay. Okay, they're trying to get a better. Okay, so hold on here. They're trying to get a better projector going for the club. Apparently, I'm not quite loud enough on their speakers. So hold on. Let's see if we can unmute this. Let's see here. Do you want me to keep going, club? Otherwise, I know there's other viewers live, but let's see here. Let me chat with the club and see if they want me to put it on pause for a moment. Should I pause or keep going with the talk? All right, let's see. Because I think somebody's going to get like plug-in speakers apparently. So if you're watching from home or you're in the club and you're listening to me, I apologize for this brief interlude here. I need that Jeopardy music. Okay, all right. So we're gonna keep on going, you guys, and perhaps the club will get better speakers. Hopefully, I hope they can hear me at least somewhat. We're gonna assume that they can, and if they can't, guess what? We'll have this on YouTube so they can go home and watch it, just like all you others who are watching it right now. All right, so let's keep going with this breeding egg scatterers. All right, so we all know that when you have fish and they hatch from eggs, they are very little. When they are born, oftentimes they are born literally with just eyeballs. Let's zoom it. Can we enhance? Can we zoom in? Let's see here. Is it going to let me? There we go. They have just eyeballs and a spine, essentially. They have a brain, of course, but it's sometimes as small as 50,000 cells or 20,000 cells when they're in their fry stage. They are also born in most cases with what we would call a yolk sac that would be in the belly here. Sometimes it's clear, sometimes it's yellow. A lot of times it is yellow. And when you have fish that are born in eggs, they're not maturing in the stomach or womb or oviducts of the mother. So they're actually, they need to develop and continue to grow in their own bodies. They can't in their parents. And so they will have an egg sac. So when a fish is born from an egg and not live born, what's kind of nice is most of them have a food source for anywhere between 24 to sometimes up to you know, a whole week, from 24 hours all the way up to a whole week, that is in their belly, right up here, right behind the eye. And this is their swim bladder that you're seeing. It usually has a reflective color on it, their swim bladder. But what they're going to look like to you in most of the species here are tiny, tiny little things the size of an eyelash. So let's talk about real quickly the types of spawns that we see in these fish that give that don't give live birth, but that give eggs as their form of birth. And we see egg scattering, and the most common egg scattering is just where they helter skelter, they drop a few eggs, and either the male fertilizes those eggs somehow in the female and then she releases them, or she releases them and drops them, and he follows the eggs down to wherever they land, and then he releases his milt, and that fertilizes the eggs. There's also some interesting adaptations that have occurred over the years, over the eons, over the millions of years, but there are a lot of different variations of this. You know, some spawn only in the morning, some spawn at night, some in the day, others only at dusk and only after they've eaten. There are very specific times. Some only spawn once a year, some only spawn when the settings are just right. And we're going to talk about some tricks and tips on that. But we'll also talk about the setup that works for most of these egg scatterers. And then, like I said, in about 5 minutes, I'll be able to describe how we get the fish that spawn with sticky eggs, is that they just stick to plants in the wild or stick to a rock and then they swim off and they parents don't care for them at all. Those are called mop spawners or adhesive egg scatterers. And in that case, I'll be able to tell you very quickly how you can start trying some of those species out, like the minute you get home. Another really important strategy that has evolved, and as I was saying at the beginning, you know, there are mid-sized cichlids, and there are some of the cichlids in the rift lakes that are mouth brooders. Also, like there are types of bettas and labyrinth fish that are mouth brooders. But that is when they basically lay eggs. Some of them scatter eggs, some of them lay them in a nest, some of them lay them in a floating nest, some of them lay them and then collect the eggs and hold even eggs in their mouth, and they wait for them to hatch. Others actually wait for the eggs to hatch and then they collect all the babies. There are a lot of different evolutionary strategies, and it's really amazing to learn about each of them and to observe each kind of fish and find out what strategy they're using. There's also territorial spawners, which are like salmon, where they go up to the same place. Another great example of this is Stiphodon gobies. They may swim up river or up a creek, and they may climb up. In some places, they climb up over 600 meters. That's, you know, that's what? That's 1,800 feet that they climb up, in one case, up waterfalls that are cliffs, and they slowly inchworm their way up, but they lay their eggs in the same general stretch of river or lake or whatnot every year, and they need certain places. And these fish are the hardest to spawn in captivity. And the other crazy part about that is a lot of those fish, salmon, stiphodons, you know, a lot of these fish, their larval young or their young babies that look like the ones in the background here, they have to wash all the way out to sea once they hatch. And then they live on plankton at sea. And then as a young fish, they make the same trek their parents did all the way back, or maybe even to a new place. And the cycle continues. They grow out at sea, or they grow out in the river that they were born in. The next group are cave spawners or nesters, and we'll be talking about a few nesters in today's talk, which is essentially the elosoma or the pygmy sunfish out of like the Gulf region. They're a beautiful little fish, a bright blue little fish. And the other group would be like batis is a good example. So like a scarlet batis, they have babies and they tend to pick a little area, and they may not be scattering the eggs willy-nilly all over, 100 yards of the river like a tetra would, but rather they kind of prepare an area that you'd call a nest. Some of them get decorative with their nests. There's cichlids that get very decorative. And then there are cave spawners, of course, just like a lot of people know plecos are cave spawners. That have an adhesive egg usually, or a parent that guards the eggs until they hatch, and sometimes even after. And then there are a whole group of oddballs that have strategies that would blow your mind. One example would be the splash tetra. The splash tetra literally jumps up and sticks its eggs to plants that are out of the water. There is even one super weird fish that never is in the water, and it leaves its eggs in moist logs and like peat moss and ferns and basically any place with high humidity. And it is the only fish that doesn't live underwater at all. It actually just lives on the marginal areas, and it looks like a worm. It's just a weird, primitive looking little squiggly thing. So we won't need to talk about any of that, but it's interesting, and you can read up on it at home. So we're just going to talk about those top two there, the egg scattering and the sticky eggs or mop scatterers. So the first thing you're going to need with all of these is a breeding tank. And the breeding tank here, we just got some little silhouettes. Really 2 to 5 gallons is fine. I know people who have done it in less. I know people who've literally bred in like a big gulp cup. They've bred killifish or, bettas or something in a mayonnaise jar. That is something you could do if you wanted to, but it's going to be easiest in a 2.5 gallon tank up to a 5 gallon tank. And one thing you want to remember is that with any fish, you really want to do your research. If you're breeding them, there's kind of a fun trial and error that you can do. But if you want to breed, especially if you're trying to do it for profit or get the most fry for your time and energy, and you feel like this is a strategy you want to learn and kind of optimize, then you really want to do your research and learn, are they going to spawn in the morning? Are they going to spawn at night? And how much room do they need? And all those things should be kind of outlined by other people online. With most species, you can go to places like Seriously Fish or Fish Base, Amazonas Magazine or Tropical Fish Hobbyists, Aquarium Co-op's forum. There's a whole bunch of places you can go. But this basic setup will take care of almost all egg scatterers. And if you can see here, this whole green layer is not the actual bottom of the tank. You have a mesh layer here, and the eggs fall through. The eggs are at the bottom. They're those black dots there, and those are laid. Now we'll talk about all the triggers and all the weirdness that goes on, all the different subtleties that may need to happen for this to occur. But the setup is the same in most cases, which is you're going to have a small tank, and that will allow you to control whether you need 2 females and 1 male, or whether you need 5 males, 5 females, or whether, what ratio of male to female you need and how dense the fish are, how much room they need to kind of flirt and do their mating dances. And do their little things that each species is unique for. But they're going to lay the eggs, and there will be a mesh. And the best type of mesh that most people use these days is a crochet mesh from Joann's Fabrics or Hobby Lobby. And it's just a plastic mesh that has enough holes that most eggs, pea-sized or smaller, will fall through. And that's so that the fish won't eat it. Now, with smaller rasboras and some sundadanios and small danios and things, you may need to get a finer mesh so that it falls through. The other strategy would be pretending that this mesh here doesn't exist. Some people believe in simply putting in the adult fish taking them from another community tank, like this big tank behind this little tank here, and getting them all ready to have babies. And we'll talk about what it means to season or to prep them for breeding in a moment. But basically, you get them ready to have babies, then you move them into the breeding tank here, and they will lay their eggs. If there's no place for the eggs to fall through and past various vegetation or moss, and Java moss works great. Nodus grass or guppy grass works great. Hornwort, things like that are that can float and kind of live mid-water or top of water work really great, because not only are they good to put on a mesh, but if you don't want to use a mesh, if you want to just put the adults in for 1 or 2 nights and then remove all the adults, then there may still be some eggs. The reason we would not want the adults to be near the eggs is because all fish are pretty much cannibals and will eat their own eggs pretty ruthlessly. I literally had some tetras spawning the other day, and this is, your classic egg, and here's a spawning mop. But this amber color is what you're looking for when you see the eggs developing. They're usually a clear color right at first, and then within 12 hours to 36 hours, they start getting more amber colored. Sometimes you can even see the fish inside. You can see their spine curled up. You can see their eyes. It's pretty amazing. So let's talk about this setup a little more. And we'll start with, so I like taking a main tank and having that main tank be my community tank. So like a 55 gallon or a 40 gallon, whatever it may be. A 20 long, keep my fish in there with a whole bunch of different fish and let them live their best life. I like planted tanks, so I keep mine planted, but this could be a bare tank and you just have it cycled and healthy and stable. And then your breeding tank, like we talked about, could have that false bottom, or it could just have a spawning mop, or it could just have floating plants. And all of this depends on the tetra or the rasbora or whatever it is that you pick, because they all have different strategies. And a lot of them do best when they're egg scatterers, having that grid or mesh that their eggs can fall through and then sit on the bottom. But the other thing you need to remember is when they sit on the bottom too long, it's very easy for the eggs to mold or fungus over. So we'll also have to keep that in mind. And there's several ways to deal with that, which comes at the very end. I have tips for that, but let me just bury the lead and let you know that really the best thing you can do is either have a low pH, which will keep it essentially sterile. The bacteria won't be able to grow in pH lower than 6.0. Or not the bacteria, but the fungus. Bacteria is another issue, and the same goes with that. Most of the bacteria that gets to the eggs and can make them go bad and kill the fertilized eggs, it tends to be bacteria that doesn't like under 6.0 or over 8.5. Now, 8.5 is pretty hard water for a lot of fish. Most of these fish we're talking about, most of the nanofish, tend to like slightly acidic water. And we'll talk about why in a moment after we finish talking about this setup. So we've got the little tank. We've got the big fish living their best life. You've got your tetras. Let's just say we're going to breed some neon tetras. And they're living here. They grow out to their full age. You see that the females are getting a belly on them. You see that the males are kind of chasing some of the other ones around, and they're schooling and kind of doing their thing, breaking up and, doing what they do. And if you're really astute, you may even notice that they start doing things like in the morning when they're feeding or right after feeding. A lot of times you'll see them go on parade where one will kind of swim past all the other ones and their colors will be more vivid. And that's usually the male. It tends to be. Now, if you have a spawning mop setup here, this is just yarn and it's floating by a little cork. And all you need is a container. So for things like Medaka rice fish, pseudomagills, pretty much every rainbow fish that's out there, this is a very small setup, but this is the setup you would need. Now, we're not going to talk about water conditions quite yet, but this is the structural setup that you would want. And this would have a filter in it, but with Medaka rice fish, people use Tupperware, they use vases, bowls, shallow trays, and the depth of the water is something we'll talk about also. But basically, you could use any of these setups, and depending on the fish, you may choose a different one. The more you know about your fish, the more you will know about what kind of setup you want to build and which one is ideal for it. But basically, this is just tons of pieces of yarn hanging down, and the fish will run through here. The female will stick her eggs on the yarn and come out the other side, and the male will go through. He'll see where she put the eggs, and he'll release his milk and fertilize it, and then he'll swim back around and chase her again, and they may do that several times. Now, the thing with this style of spawning is that hopefully they won't be able to go back through and find the eggs, because the male will be in hot pursuit and sticking with that female pretty tightly. But hopefully they won't go back through and go picking at this spawning mop, but it is a potential issue. And because of this, a lot of people say that, know whether your fish spawn in the morning or at night. Put them in the tank. Let them spawn. If they spawn at night, put them in the afternoon. And first thing in the morning, take the adults out, and then just leave the mop in here and let the babies hatch and grow out in here. Likewise, if they only spawn first thing in the morning, a lot of rainbow fish are super active in the morning. They have colors and behaviors you'll never see anytime other than the morning. I mean, it's incredible. They have different patterns even. That is a great opportunity to watch. If you don't scare them and you sit off, maybe 10 feet from the tank, you can oftentimes catch what they're doing. Now, if you're right up on a tank, there's a good chance you're going to stress them out. But here's a good look at a spawning mop. They're easy to make. You just use acrylic yarn. You don't want to use wool yarn. Things like that can rot, cotton especially, but acrylic works well. Any of the kind of synthetic stuff works really well. People also use pool noodles and sponges and Brillo pads and all sorts of other things out there. But this is the basic idea: is you're making a fake plant, and the fish will swim through. It'll hold on. All the little fibers on the mop will hold on to the sticky egg, and up close the eggs, oftentimes it looks like Velcro, where there will be little hooks that basically microscopically hook to any little fiber or any texture on the plant, or in this case on the mop. Now, the other thing is, with all these setups, you're either going to want no filter, which is okay sometimes. It really depends on the type of it really depends on the type of fish you have. Like with rainbow fish, they're going to want flowing water, and they really like oxygen. A lot of tetras also like oxygen. In that case, you're going to want, maybe an air stone in there. Maybe you want something like this, where you've got a box filter with the bio and mechanical filtration, and it's got a little power head so that they have some flow to swim against. Any hill stream species will definitely want that. But if you have a flooded forest species, like many of the tetras, most of the rasboras, a lot of the pencil fish, things like that, a sponge filter will do you just fine. And if you have black water, which is stained with botanicals and tannins, if that pH is under 6.5, you can go filterless if those fish are native to still water when they spawn. So there's a lot of options out there. But again, this is the same principle. You'll put your fish in there and you'll get them ready. And there's different ways to get your fish ready. And so we'll talk about that in a moment, like preparing your fish before you put them in a week or two ahead of time. But you can put them in, and if they're going to mop spawn, they'll literally lay eggs on the mop that night, the next night. Some people leave their mop in 3, 4, 5 days, and the fish may eat all the eggs that are showing on the outside of the mop, but maybe the center of the mop they won't get to. It really depends on the species. Some are voracious and they're curious, and they're going to look and they're going to try to hunt down every egg, and you'll learn, okay, I got to pull that mop literally the night I put them in there. They're going to spawn on it immediately. And some fish, like rainbow fish, you may only want a spawning mop in that tank. You may not want plants in that tank. You may want to cycle it with kind of a glass bottom. It's whatever you like, because at the same time that I say this is how you'd set it up, this is how you catch the eggs for egg scatterers, the other truth is that, you know, fish are fish. And the males and females are going to get together. They're going to fall in love like little fishies do. And they're going to have babies one way or another. It's hard to stop them sometimes. The part that is not easy to stop is them eating their young. And that's why in most community tanks, your fish are actually having babies. They're spawning, they're having their eggs. They're even fertilizing their eggs. It's just that either the eggs get eaten or the babies get eaten within days because they're delicious. And apparently, you know, the parents think so too. But if you have a big tank, you have lots of plants, there's a good chance you'll have a few that survive. But again, we're talking about optimizing this. And one of the first things when you're getting ready to get your fish in the mood to breed, and something when you're doing research on the fish, is to figure out what makes the males and females different. The females oftentimes may have different colors or different finnage, but they're going to all pretty much get bigger bellies. Now, a male that eats a lot of food can sometimes get a big belly, but usually he'll go to the bathroom later at night. You can maybe avoid feeding them for a day or two and kind of see who's got the big bellies, who's got the brighter color, who's got the longer fins and the pointier fins. Those are kind of generic signs across all fish that tend to hold pretty true. And if they don't, you'll probably read something about it. You know, if the female is more colorful, like in some of the nanochromis and things like that, or nanocara. So let's see here. So when you want to spawn this setup, you're going to trigger it. Now, one of the easiest ways to trigger it, and we're going to talk about being the fish in a moment, but one of the easiest ways to trigger things is fresh water. Now, I know a lot of people are subscribing to the father fish method where it says don't change your water and so forth. That's okay. You can wait for that to work if you want. But if you want to trigger something to happen, you need to show the fish that something has changed. They generally have babies in nature when it is changing, when the dry season turns to the wet season, or when the wet season turns to the dry season. They're going to have a strategy for survival. And with egg scatterers, their main strategy across all species is that they will have their babies when the water is at its lowest. They will have their babies as the water is returning, as the rain's coming back, because that's when everything floods and reconnects and rivers overflow and lakes overflow and rivers connect to lakes and things go out to the ocean quicker and all this water is moving around. Well, you can replicate some of these things in your own aquarium, and we'll talk about like how you're going to do that soon. But in your breeding tank, you're going to spark a change, whatever it may be, and then you're going to get your eggs on, whether it's a spawning mop or whether it's Java fern or whether you have a mesh, you know, mid-level on this thing, and the eggs all fall through to the bottom where the parents can't get them. Then you're going to take the parents out. Thank you, WikiHow. They did these nice little illustrations, and I totally stole them. I mean, I illustrated it. And then somewhere between 24 hours and a week, actually with rainbow fish, you could go all the way, and Medaka, you can go all the way to 2 or 3 weeks in some cases. And in colder species and climates, the fish can take months. But in general, with most tetras, with corydoras, with rasboras, we're talking the eggs will turn into free swimming fry within 1 to 7 days. And that's pretty quick. Yeah. So keep an eye on it. Learn if you can online how long you're waiting. And usually the babies will appear in the corner of your tanks. Now, we haven't talked about it, but you can set the tank up to be as much like the real thing, the environment that they would be living in, where you have places for them to hide and so forth. But a lot of people don't want to do that because they want food to be easy to find for the babies, because you already removed the parents, right? You removed the danger. So those eggs are going to be okay. Those fry are going to be okay. But in some cases, you may have snails, you may have shrimp, you may have some other critter, scuds, planaria. So also keep an eye out for what pests you have. And that's why a small breeding tank is great to have, because you can keep an eye on it better. And if you start seeing little triangle-headed worms on the glass, you'll know you have planaria, and those might be eating the eggs. Those might even be eating the fry the first few days. So once the fry are hatched, the next big challenge is feeding these teeny tiny little things. And this is where a lot of people drop the ball, because as I mentioned, a lot of those baby fish, they will have yolk sacs. And so they will go a certain period, whether it's 12 hours or whether it's a week, where they don't need your help. They will absorb pure protein and vitamins from their mother that she gave them in the form of yolk in their bellies. And a lot of times you can actually see that yolk, like in corys, which are not, it's not exactly what we're talking about today, but that is what you will see dwindle down in their belly. And around day 4 or 5, usually in corys, you'll actually see that it's gone. And then they start foraging and looking for little worms and nematodes and things to eat that are yummy to them. But yes, be aware of that. So a lot of times people will grow them out in that same hatching tank, but a lot of times people will move them. And the big reason that this occurs a lot of times too is, you don't want them to be with the parents. They could get kind of beat up, and the parents a lot of times will rip fins or chase them, not allow them to get all the food that they could get. And in some cases, fish are so prolific, and in a tank, there's so much hiding space, and there's so much live food because you built like a real ecosystem, that the issue is not, you're not worried about are my fish going to find food and survive. It's how many fish am I going to have? I don't know if I can take care of all these fish. And you want them to, eat each other. But yeah. And yeah, so let's see here. And so some people put them back with the parents and have a communal tank. Now, in most cases with tetras, rasboras, you're going to want to set aside a tank for them to grow out in, whether that's the hatching tank or a bigger tank. And the bigger the space they have, in general, the faster they will grow, as long as you provide them food. Baby fish need to eat between 5 and 15 times a day. And most people are not great at providing feed that often in the form of, adding live food. So that's why it's really great to build an entire ecosystem in your tank. And that's part of prep and conditioning. We're going to talk about prep and conditioning in the sense that, yes, you're getting your fish ready and you're knowing your males from females ideally, and you're knowing the ratio of males to females, and you're giving them good protein and food. But as I mentioned earlier, most of these fish we're talking about today, the rasboras and the tetras, they come from the flooded forests. Brazil does this. South America in general does this. The Orinoco. Also, all of India and, southeastern Asia, it has this monsoon season. So there's a wet and a dry season, a wet and humid season, and then a, hotter and dry season. Which may still be very humid, but it's going to be not as flooded. So places like even Northern Australia, Papua New Guinea, Indonesia, those places also flood. Sometimes not this extreme. You need a large river system in some cases. But places like Thailand, Myanmar, India, they all flood this extreme. Africa, the Congo also floods like this. So basically, everywhere in this green section here on the map is where our ornamental fish tend to come from. Now, there's some exceptions. You know, Florida flagfish are going to come from right up here. And, you know, there's a blind cave tetra that comes from Mexico up here. And yeah, we have paradise fish that go all the way up into almost Korea naturally. Some of the like the black tailed paradise fish. But in general, this is the hot spot. This is the zone where it's flood and the forest fills and all these little dry spots connect. And that's why they have that style, which is I'm not going to protect the babies. I'm going to have as many as I can and let them have the best chance they can have on their own. Just hopefully the wolves don't get them, kind of a thing. Now, all these fish here, all, you know, the real popular fish in the hobby, the neon tetra, the green neon tetra, the black neon tetra, the skirt tetras, you know, all these fish here are in this category we're talking about, where they're kind of spreading their eggs, and they're beautiful, they're colorful, but they don't take care of their young. And you can use this same system for egg scatterers. Now, these are not the mop spawners, but this is a group of fish you can use that whole style for. And it's literally thousands of fish. It's something like, you know, 30% of the fish out there. Now, when getting them ready, it may not be easy to see what this is, but I grow algae and aufux, which is the biofilm and protein film growing on the sidewalls of your aquarium. And I grow this on my aquarium until it looks all scuzzy and gross like this. And each one of these is a scud. Now, I feed my mid-size. So if I was raising something like, you know, a mid-size tetra or Congo tetras, a bigger tetra, I would be feeding these guys. And I personally grow them live because live food has a lot of benefits. Now, a lot of my aquariums actually have this live food culture, whether it's Daphnia or infusoria or whatever it may be, white worm or black worms rather. It's in the substrate. It's in the equation, so to speak, of what I am going to have in the whole ecosystem for my fish to eat. Because, like I said, it's hard to feed 15 times a day, and little baby fish need to graze all day long. When they start out, they're literally eating the algae, the single cell organisms, the protein, and the amino acids that are making up this scuzzy, gross stuff that you scrape off your glass most days. That's what they're eating. And, you know, very small protozoas and things like that, very small single cell organisms, amoebas, infusoria or paramecium. They're little slipper-shaped critters that move around in the tank. And you can create infusoria by putting a glass on a windowsill in the sun, ideally, any time of year. And you just take some broccoli or some lettuce. You can, if you want, blanch it and then just throw it in the cup and let it sit at about 70 degrees Fahrenheit, you know, 80s even better. And you just let it sit and basically rot. And those critters are going to come out. The microbes will come out. And then the little critters have laid their eggs, even though you don't see it. They've laid their eggs on everything, just like fruit flies get into your house. Paramecium and infusoria are going to get into your water, and they're going to be already in your aquarium. Even if you have a spotless aquarium, I promise you there are some in your tank. But the more natural your tank is, the more botanical matter you have, the more there will be, and the more food there will be for baby fish. And like I said, a lot of times you'll need to do the research and know, how long do these baby fish need to eat microscopic food? When do I transition to brine shrimp or to Daphnia? Or when can I feed them flake food? When can I feed them bloodworms? Things like that. Because again, this is a picture of how small like a sundadanio is the first day it hatches. and its yolk is clear. But even though, even if it weren't, it is so small. This is not even the length of my eyelash. This is about half as wide as my eyelash, and that's its entire spinal cord and its eyes right there. That's very common in fish like this. And that's when you really don't want in these very tiny fish that are even under an inch, like chili rasboras, sundaanios, danionellas, maybe even ember tetras, things like that. It's a lot easier, in my opinion, to allow a tank to get lots of algae and biofilm, and to have it set up, whether you just want to keep maybe a snail in there or a few shrimp in there or whatever it may be, keep something in there, or just plants in there, and you let it run its course, let it do its thing, and you're just going to let it be, and it will develop these little creatures. If you've ever kept a fish tank with shrimp in it or snails in it, you'll see that there's little white creatures that start moving around. There's little springtails that start leaping around on the surface tension of the water. There is all sorts of life under the microscope I've shown in videos on my channel at different amounts of, so at 3 months versus 6 months versus a year. So you're going to want a seasoned tank for these very tiny species. If you're working with a bigger species, something like a mid-sized tetra, or maybe like rummy nose rasboras or rummy nose tetras, something in that size that gets maybe up to 2 inches, then you don't need to worry quite as much about this, because you can feed things like golden pearls, or a little bit of egg yolk broken up is a very old school but tried and true method. You can also go buy things like rapashi. Golden pearls, like I just mentioned, are a food that the fish hobby and the fish industry uses to feed their fish. Now, when getting your fish ready, we're getting there almost to the most important stuff here. But when getting your fish ready, so here is a imperial lapis tetra, and this is a female. So as I was saying, sometimes it's hard to tell them apart. Sometimes here it's easy, because the female here, she has beautiful blue iridescent color with a pale yellow in her tail, a little hint of red in her tail, and some pink on the eye. But that's about it. Look at the male. He is bright red. But their bellies, you could say, I can't really tell what's what, even though this female technically does have a belly full of eggs. But when you're figuring out what fish you want to put together in the breeding chamber, some people swear by taking out the fish and putting all the females together and all the males together and keeping them apart for a week or two, so that they're that much more, ready to meet one another, let's say. But from my experience, that can make a difference in a few difficult fish. But most fish are ready to meet each other no matter what, as long as they are if they're round and full of eggs, if they've got proper food. And that for right before they're going to spawn, you're going to have a series of triggers that, like I said, the water could be the trigger. It could be other things too, like the temperature or the pressure. And that's the most that's the big money, the big ticket that we are finally at today, the big like reveal, and the thing that older fish keepers may have some crazy thing that you think sounds insane, but maybe it works. Maybe playing Kenny G or Barry White or Barry Manilow. I hope it's not Barry Manilow. But anyways, maybe playing, just the right song puts the fish in the mood. But let's talk about more tried and true methods than superstition. So most of these fish, like I said, are coming from these flooded forests. A lot of times it's really shallow water, murky water. So what do fish in these, environments, what do they need and what do they use to survive? And so you can learn a lot by looking up where the fish live and looking up what their biotope is, or what their habitat is. How many plants are there? How clear is the water? How many other fish are there? How many predatory fish are there? Are they a bright and colorful fish? Like, do they like to show off? You know, in that case, it might mean that the water visibility is pretty good. If they are red color, it probably means they're hanging out in more shallow water, because red is the color that after about 10 feet, you can no longer see underwater. So you can learn so much by even just a picture like this. So if you Googled, you know, cherry barbs, and this popped up, you know, Bangladesh or India, and you see a monsoon season, you see the water's kind of muddy, but not super muddy. It's probably aerated, moving on the river. You've got plants enough, so there is some soil. It's not just mud. And it's shallow because, like I said, all these plants are popping up. But you can see the houses, that they're on stilts back here, and that it's flooded, and that people have the umbrellas, it's raining. So you can look at other things than just the fish's profile to look for cues. Look up where it's from and look up other pictures. Look up where it's from and look at pictures of other creatures in their habitat. There are so many little tricks over the years that you will pick up that can help you figure out, like, maybe this one fish, maybe you notice that the monsoon season every year starts, you know, check the weather forecast. Maybe it's 80 degrees on average, and there is a massive thunderstorm and low pressure system that comes in. And because of that, when we have low pressure systems outside of our houses, outside of our fish tanks, a lot of people swear by this. Up here in the Pacific Northwest, maybe up over there, you have a nor'easter over in off the coast there. And when the low pressure comes in, that is the start of the monsoon season for a lot of parts of the world. Like I said, South America, India, Southeast Asia, and the Pacific, as well as Africa, all those places all share that in common, that low pressure comes in, then it rains, thunder and lightning, hail, and that hail falls in the water, and it cools the water. The clouds develop super tall, and they end up cooling the rain all the way up 40,000 feet, or, you know, 35,000 feet up in these clouds. And a lot of times the water will become cloudy. So some people think, you know, that's when you should turn your power head on. And so these fish are used to these cues of, I'm going to spawn once it's a certain whatever it may be. And that is the mystery that I'm not going to tell you. I'm going to give you a list here of some more things, but think about this, for instance. So this is in South America, in in Venezuela, and there's a lake that gets 312 days of lightning a year. And every time there's lightning, it actually fixes nitrogen and it creates ozone. Also, what goes on, that's that smell of rain. Humans are really good at that smell. We call it petrichor a lot of times, the smell of rain hitting dirt or hitting like the road. And that's called petrichor, that smell that a lot of people, you know, have really fond thoughts of or memories of. Well, fish can sense 1 in a trillion molecules of ozone. And there must be a reason for that, right? Is it that, you know, they're used to lightning like in Venezuela, and the days when it's not happening, that's a cue for them? Or in other places, maybe it's that there isn't lightning, and only during the wet season there is lightning. And so you'll have to be the scientists and the fish keepers, and this is where the skill of fish keeping really comes in, of understanding what puts them in the mood. But I'm going to give you guys some information here of the things that I've found that I believe trigger them. And some of these you may not believe, or you may not think trigger them, but I'm just going to throw them out there because other people have, or there is scientific evidence as well as observations that these things work. So like we mentioned, the low pressure moving in. So it shows that there's a big cloud, a big storm, lots of moisture in the air. It's the wet season coming in. Well, maybe you have a fish that's from Africa, from the Nile, and maybe it actually doesn't like the wet season. Maybe it likes mid in between the wet season and the dry season, just consistent weather. Well, maybe that's the case, and high pressure is good for it. But these are things that you can control just by opening your window. Any window in the house your house will then pressurize to it. Also, the other thing is think about the weight of all those miles of atmosphere of oxygen and CO2 and methane, all the different things up in the atmosphere push down on us with pounds of force or kilos of force. And they push down on the water, and water's heavier than air, so it pushes down too. So the other thing you want to think about is fish have lateral lines, and they can sense along their lateral lines and with their swim bladders. Like here's a little pseudomegill, Melis. These are a beautiful one that's brackish usually, and they can sense when the rain's starting, which means the water will rise. It also means the rivers will flow. So the amount of flow in the water, the amount of oxygen in the water, which they're sensing through their gills, the sound of thunder and lightning, some people even think can trigger it. That's why some of those, I think it's a little hokey, but the lights have like strobe mode or lightning mode on like the Fluval sky or the Phoenix sky. It could be because of that. Now, the main things that we know for a fact with most of these fish really do trigger things are going to be temperature of the water. So going from generally we're faking the wet season. So it was dry, hot, sun pounding down. But if they're from the rainforest, they're probably under the trees. So they're used to the dark. So we know that light is also an issue. Most streams and rivers in the rainforest of that equatorial region, they're going to want it dim. So maybe turn your lights down in that spawning tank. Like we said, you're going to already have them all fed and ready. They've got food. Now, then they're going to also know the TDS. They're going to know the total dissolved solids, or the KH and the GH, the general hardness, and the carbonate and calcium hardness in the water. They're also going to understand, like I said, the flow, how much water is moving past them, how much water they need to run through their gills. All of these things, they have little cells and sensors. And there's a whole range of fish, and all these tetras you see here are all from South America, and there's different kinds. And even though they're all kind of similar, for instance, the bleeding heart tetra, nobody bred one of those in captivity until about 6 years ago. And nobody could figure out, what it was. And the person who did, Andre, now I can't remember. He's the Bioaquatics is the name of his company. But he's kept it kind of a secret because he knows what the trigger is. And sometimes it's, that they need another fish, or as we call them, a dither fish or a cospecific. Some fish live deeper in the water in the rivers, and they need to see that there are pencil fish, for instance, which always hang out at the top of the water. So maybe in a complex case, you'll see that your fish is actually waiting to see that the pencil fish are calm, which means there's no predators around, and that the water has gone from hot to maybe 3 or 4 degrees cooler. Maybe it's 8 degrees cooler. And this all depends on, are they in the mountains? Are they shallow streams that water temperature could change quickly? Or are they in the Amazon or the Ganges River, where they're massive rivers and it takes a whole lot of water to even change a couple degrees? Now, cospecifics and dither fish, one cue is that the fish are calm. Another really interesting one when spawning fish is if you can get one fish to spawn like a corydoras or a pleco species in your tank, they actually release hormones, testosterone, estrogen, progesterone, growth hormones. And sometimes in nature, during the wet season, it could be that the water is so densely packed with fish, it's probably nowhere near as dense as your aquarium, but that is detectable. And it may be that, a little bit of that estrogen and testosterone in the water gives your species that you're trying to spawn, and you've tried everything, a lot of times people will take even just a few gallons of water from a tank with other spawning fish, and they'll put that water into the tank. Another really important one is going to be pH. So, you've got water depth, water flow, oxygenation. You've got how fast the water is moving. Are there plants or are there botanicals? What chemicals do those botanicals release? Maybe it's that all the trees, with all the rain and the wind and stuff that comes with the wet season, a lot of leaves fall into those streams, but maybe it takes 6 months for those leaves to, fall when they're green and then fully decay and turn into the compounds that are in the river. So all these things are just pieces of a puzzle that you're going to have to figure out. And to me, it's the most exciting and fun part of fish keeping. The group that we were talking about, fish that kind of lay eggs in an area like salmon or baddis. Here's a Gulf pygmy sunfish from it's a native fish to the United States. Beautiful fish, but you can start seeing when they're ready to spawn because the coloration. One male will color up. All the other males, even if you have 5 others and there's 10 fish in there, usually only one will become the most colorful. The others may have a little bit of blue, but they won't color up like the one male. However, if dominance is being challenged and one is getting bigger than the other, then suddenly one day you might look in the tank and find, oh wow, 2 of them are bright blue. And that male, whoever gets to color up and be the brightest blue fish in there, is the one that gets to show off for the females, and he gets to spawn with the females. There's all sorts of things that go on, including males whose strategies are to not color up. They save all their energy instead of trying to eat all the right foods to give them the right pigment in their body, which, believe it or not, does take specific carotenoids and specific anthocyanins in their diet, and they have to be eating that stuff and getting proper nutrition. If they don't look good. And the females, that's why they're looking for all these things like cloudy eyes, missing scales. These are all signs that the females are looking for in a good male. Tattered fins, that might mean that he didn't win the fight, he got beat up, and so therefore he's not a clear winner. So the other thing you want to make sure is that you're keeping the fish healthy in general. But the grow out is kind of your last stage. And I just wanted to mention those fish because they don't really fall into either category. They're not really egg scatterers. They kind of pick one area and they kind of protect their young, but they'll also eat their young. So they're a tricky one. They are best colony spawned like baddis, like elosoma, which that was the name of the fish just there, the Gulf pygmy sunfish. But there'll be exceptions to the rules, and I want you to be ready for the exceptions to the rules because sometimes that's the exciting part. It's the tricky part. You can read about it online. Maybe someone else has figured it out or observed it. Maybe somebody watched the fish in the wild and wrote a book about it, So there's all sorts of helpful things out there that will be great for you to learn about. But as you grow out your baby fish, so they've survived, you fed them, they had their early food, you fed them tiny food and then progressively bigger and bigger, and you did your research on what that is that they're going to eat. Are they vegetarians? Are they omnivores? Do they only eat insects? All this stuff is stuff you can usually look up. And if it's not noted, it probably means in general they're omnivorous and they'll kind of do a little bit of, the same thing as all fish in this category. But I just want to show you too, here is literally before they hatch, the fish when they're growing out, they have their yolk sac up there in letter A. They don't have eyes developed yet, but they have the yolk sac in the egg. They have their spinal cord. They have the cells that are going to be their brain and their spinal cord. They even have the start of fins here. Then quickly they develop eyes. That's one of the first big things that develops. Their eyes get very advanced very quickly. Then they get their organs, their swim bladder, their fins develop, And somewhere right around E, generally they'll hatch. This is a neon tetra without the color on it. These are put in formaldehyde, unfortunately, for science purposes. But here you'll see that, you know, they've got their male or female cells, and here she's got her belly essentially growing with her swim bladder in there, and then like her liver and kidneys. All that is all tucked up in here. And then here you can see the yolk is there when they hatch. And that's a big old yolk that they're going to live off of for a week or so, maybe 4 days. And they'll absorb all that. And then here they look kind of sunken, but look at how the eyes have developed in that short a time, and the fins have developed clear. I mean, these things happen quickly. And then maybe in about 3 weeks from there, they'll develop into this, where you can actually start seeing you know, structures in the body. And that's another really fun part of all this. Here are some fish that I was just recently spawning. That these happen to be wild bettas. They have the other odd habit of they do mouth brooding, but first they also have a bubble nest, and then they collect the eggs, and then they keep the babies in their mouth for a little while. But it's an interesting fishy world out there, and these are over a month old, and sometimes they stay kind of, you know, with just eyes, the spine, and not a whole lot more. But on these ones and most baby fish, you can see if they're getting enough food by their belly getting big and round and pink when they eat. And if they haven't had food, it gets sunken, like here on this one on the far left. It'll be smaller than its head, whereas when they're full, sometimes it'll be the size of their head. Which is kind of cool. You know, you can culture all these live foods and things that we talked about. You can culture different types of spirulina or algae, different types of cyanobacteria, rather, is what spirulina is. But you can also culture algae. You can culture paramecium or infusoria. And I have videos where we look at that under the microscope if you're more curious. But I want to end this talk on a couple tips that are really kind of weird and out there that I've gotten a kick out of over the years for doing this breeding. I know I told you a lot of the weird things that work for spawning fish. You know, a lot of times it's dropping the pH from, say, 7 to 6.5, and the temperature from 80 degrees Fahrenheit down to 76 degrees Fahrenheit, and then adding an air stone and a power head, and ta-da, in the morning, the fish will have babies or have eggs rather, and you take the fish out, and then the eggs hatch, and you got babies. Sometimes you get a few babies, sometimes you get a ton of babies. It really just depends on the fish. But there are really bizarre patterns that go on in nature. Now, this is a picture out of Ivan McColgee's book. He's a friend of mine. He has photographed all over the Orinoco Basin, and he basically has showed us that bees, equus, pencilfish, Nanostoma equus, that they swim in it. They form a circle, and then they all swim towards the surface in this pattern, and they get tighter and tighter together towards the surface. Why do they do this? He doesn't know. I don't know. Are they defending where they just laid eggs in the center because it's mostly males that are doing this? I don't know. Are they attracting females? I don't know. They don't do this in the aquarium. And so find those little things. Provide them an aquarium with enough space, or with enough realistic food sources of little food, or enough, you know, natural plants to where they live. There might be something you're missing that is something that we just don't know, because in aquaria it is so foreign to the wild. And here it might just be they need, you know, tens of thousands of gallons, and something triggered it, like, you know, coconuts falling in the water. I don't know, but it's something that, you know, occurs, and he's seen it time and time again in different regions, and he doesn't know why they do it. So it's one of the wonders of the universe. Now, another tip to help you out: if you've got eggs, Now, you may want to put them in an egg tumbler that's air powered or that's turbine powered, something like that. You can tumble eggs and stop them from developing rot. And basically, you know, a rolling stone gathers no moss or mold. And good eggs should look either like a very clear egg, translucent right at first. Then they will get, if they develop really far, sometimes you'll see little fish in them curled up with just two eyes and a spine. But also the other thing you'll see is this amber color, this kind of like a reddish golden hue. And if you see that they're white or that they're not quite that color, that they're like a yellow or like a hazy, foggy, you know, kind of blonde color, or some other black or other color, then they've got some sort of issue, and you want to get them away from the other eggs. So whether they're in a tumbler and moving, and some eggs are more prone to rot, if the pH is low enough, you won't get those rots. You can also add botanicals, so things like catappa leaves or things like that will prevent it. Oftentimes, having a pH under 6.5 or 6 will do that. Oftentimes, most tetras like to spawn between 4.0 and 6.0 pH or 6.5 pH. They like that low, very tannic water or rich in botanicals. And if you have eggs that are not hatching, another really cool thing that you can do that Gary Lang taught me is you can take a little vial for fish eggs, put your rainbow fish eggs, pull them off the spawning mop, say they're a day or two late from all the other ones have hatched and all the other little fish are swimming around the corner of your tank. Well, you can take those, put them in a fish like in a API test vial, and you take that test vial, put them in it, then you go to your deepest tank. So say you have a 2-foot deep tank, even if it's a foot deep tank, it's better than nothing. And with the top closed, you sink that test tube all the way to the bottom of the tank, open it up, try to not let the egg pop out, like there should be full of water. So when you open it, it should just kind of neutralize. But that pressure at the bottom of the tank, even though it's maybe 3% higher, let it into the test tube, then cap it off, and then take the cap test tube back out with your eggs that haven't hatched, and literally put it in your back pocket, walk around. Don't forget about it, or you'll have crushed fish, crushed eggs, and crushed baby fry. But you can then take that and walking around for an hour or two, usually the extra pressure in that vial, just a little percentage, and the act of doing that, the shock of different tank water, and the movement of you walking and it sloshing, they'll hatch. And that's a great way to hatch fish that are stuck. And you feel like, when are these going to hatch? Because sometimes they won't hatch. If you use, for instance, double the recommended dose of like a dechlorinator, like Seachem XL or Prime rather, Seachem Prime or Safe, then it actually can elasticize the outside proteins of an egg and cause them not to hatch, according to some research that I believe it was Tom Barr worked on some of that, and then also Gary Lang worked on that with rainbow fish and showed that it was the case. But that was his solution to try to avoid it. Now, the very last tips and things, are don't fight nature. At the end of the day, don't fight nature. It is something to behold, to love, and maybe you need to try a new strategy that happens in the nature that your fish come from. This is a perfect example, by the way, of the color you want to see rather than a milky white color. That means those eggs are golden and that there's proteins in there and amino acids developing into fish. And there are so many kinds of fish. Surprisingly, like this Tucano tetra right here is one of the trickier ones to breed. The bleeding heart tetra is a tricky one to breed. The Equus pencilfish is one that hasn't been bred in captivity still. And yet the neon tetra, pretty easy to breed. Lemon tetra, super easy to breed. Silvertip tetra, super easy to breed. So go out there and find out what is going to be your Moby Dick, your challenge, your white whale, the tetra that's hard for you to breed, or the one that maybe you figured out the secret to. The one tetra that, or rasbora that you figured out, it needs just this or that, or it needs this fish with it. And those are the things that you will carry with you for life as a fish keeper and truly love about fish keeping and getting into it. So, thank you guys for having me talk the Granite State Fish Club. I'm so happy to chat with you. And let's see here. I think we're going to get some questions text to me in just a moment. But, thank you guys for having me speak. Thank you, those of you who wanted to watch along. Sorry, we had a couple little interruptions here and there with the speakers. I hope they got it figured out. But thank you for your time. And I always love talking to clubs and to all of you who decided to join today for a kind of guided tour rather than a Q&A one-on-one right away. We'll try to redo that soon, maybe tomorrow or the next day. But I have a question coming in from Steven's phone, which is, do you think black phantom and lemon tetras can be crossbred? So those are both Hyphosobricon is the name of the genus that they're in. So that would maybe lend you to think that they can crossbreed. But the fact that they live in areas that overlap and that we don't see them hybridizing leads me to think that they probably don't hybridize. They may if you did in vitro fertilization or something like that, but my guess is that that would not be a fruitful endeavor because they do live in the same areas and we don't see natural hybrids. Where, for instance, we do see CPDs, celestial pearl danios, and erythromicrons, which are the emerald dwarf rasboras. We actually can cross those without using hormones or any in vitro fertilization. And we can actually cross those, and they make kind of an interesting fish that's a little bigger than either one of them. Has a tail dot, and then it has a darker blue body. It still has some stripes, but it also has kind of the star-speckled sky orange pattern, and its fins have kind of a lighter orange banding on them. So it is interesting when you mix species and try to cross them, because if they're in the same genus, there's a chance that they might cross. Now, what's very crazy is that even if they're not in the same genus, like a sturgeon and a paddlefish that are ancient fish, like 350 million years of evolution has gone on, since they separated. They were able to, in Russia, in vitro fertilize, inseminate the egg, and have babies, which was a complete shock. And I think I can't recall if it was an accident. It was a couple years ago. But sometimes even like a camel and a llama that are separated by North and South North and South America, they used to roam during the Ice Age and before. And then the Old World was the only place where they were. Well, even being separated by the giant continents with the little alpacas living in the Andes of South America and the camels being native to Central Asia, they're able to cross and they can have babies with no help with hormones or anything. It's wild. So yeah, but again, thank you guys. I'm going to turn on the sound just to see if we have any questions from the club that I'm missing. Let's see here. So do we have any questions, Granite State? Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you.
Okay, do you guys have any questions, or should I just let you guys have a great day and stop talking?
I don't think anybody has any questions right now. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you so much, you guys. Have a wonderful day, and I'll take care. I'll talk to you guys soon.
Will do. Thank you. Thank you. Have a great one.
All right, guys. So for anybody who's live in the chat, Does anybody have questions? I mean, might as well while you guys are also here too. If you have any questions about breeding egg scatterers and egg stickers, that is fish that stick their eggs to things. It was a specific subject today rather than a let me answer your questions. But I was talking with the New Hampshire club who, kindly asked me to chat with them. And so there were some questions, says Jeff Kane. Okay, let's see here. I might not see them because they are, because I'm on StreamYard, but let me go back and see if they're in there. They might be missing, so please ask again if you didn't get your question answered in just a moment here. Yeah, I'm not seeing the questions. Victus. Okay, let me see if I can find. Oh wait, Victus. Thank you. Survival of the fishiest. Let's see, Victus. Can they hang? Wait, the assassins, can they hang with 67 to 72? Water is soft, boosting pH a touch. Like that's. Oh wait, I can click on this. Like that species. But if they're tropical, no go, no heaters. Copy on. Oh, the Bacter AE. So was this a question about assassin snails and whether they can live as cold as 67 or 72? They do like warmer water, but I have seen them do okay in the low 70s at Aquarium Zen in the unheated tanks in the store. As long as they have enough food and they can bury in the dirt or sand, the substrate. But that's all I know about that, unfortunately. Okay, let's see here. Yeah, and thank you, as Andy Carson said, thank you, Granite State Aquarium Club, for allowing us to share the stream. Yeah. Amy J says, do you have any tips for spawning loaches? Oh, yeah, the gastromyzon, the pseudogastromyzon. Beautiful, beautiful loaches. I love them. The biggest tip I have, unfortunately, is not one you're probably going to like, but it is use a large tank. Everyone I know who spawned those well, like more than 1 to 4 at a time, spawn them in like a 3, 4, 500 gallon tank, like 1,000-liter tank. And flow oxygen and lots of biofilm. And then basically what you want is large, smooth, round rocks where they can kind of stick to you and they can show off. The males can spar on those rocks and the females can sit on smaller rocks among them. And then you want some gravel areas and some sand riffles or just sand, but riffles are best because they'll lay their eggs and they'll settle. And the riffles, if you have a power head or something running, over time, the eggs will get covered within a few minutes if you have quite a flow going over that sand. And that works out really well. But I've seen people in Australia breed them and, not just those, but also the other loaches like the Borneo sucker loaches and things like that, but they are incredibly beautiful. And really, I think the trick is to get them in the mood feeding wise. And I think they spawn for the most part, they'll spawn year round in your tank, but they kind of do it in like 3 to 4 months and then wait another 3 to 4 months before they have babies. And the babies just kind of grow up on their own eating biofilm. Yeah. Let's see here. All right. So Luke Wang, what's up? Luke Wong, if anybody's interested in our Sacramento Club meeting, it's happening today. We have Caroline Estes. Oh, nice. Speaking on the history of women in the hobby. I know that's going to be awesome. With both Pam. And both Pams will be there also. Right on. The meeting is at Round Table Pizza in Folsom. And for those who aren't too far away, we will be streaming it. Or for those who are too far away, we will be streaming it on the club's website. Cool. I will try to check that out then. What about sparkling gouramis? Yeah, sparkling gouramis are another kind of example of fish that spawn in a kind of little area. They are technically egg scatterers, but they will, their eggs, I'm not sure if they have any adhesive property to certain plants, but I think they may, because I've seen their eggs in like plants that have, you know, like a section that they could fall into, like rosettes and things. And sparkling gouramis will readily spawn for you if you just keep them in good quality water and an aquarium with little microfauna and things. You don't even need to like trigger it by, you know, sparking a false wet season. Just give them a good life. Try to feed them live food, baby brine shrimp or daphnia, and they will spawn on their own. They're pretty good that way, and they're actually, for the most part, if you have a well-planted tank and have some Java moss or something like that in there that's nice and tangled where the babies can kind of hide, ideally have something like hornwort or kabamba floating up high so that the babies can hide at the surface. But usually the babies, when they first hatch, they'll go in the corners and they'll go up to the top to try to avoid the parents, which will be down low. And then as they get kind of mid-age, like 2 to 3 months, they'll hang out down low with their parents. But sometimes at any age, you'll see the little tiny babies just hanging out along the substrate, and they're usually hunting. Even the little babies will hunt like seed shrimp and ostracods and, you know, paramecium, stuff like that. Amy J, thank you so much for a lot of info. There wasn't a lot of info on successful attempts online. Oh, yeah, no problem. Message me if you want any more info. I might be able to put you in touch with some of the people who've done it. I know Corey from Aquarium Co-op, though, had it happen in his 800-gallon tank just accidentally. And the guys who have a channel, it's not Keeping Fish Simple, but another Australian fish keeper that I can't remember the name of right now, who's a YouTuber. He had it happen in a Hillstream tank in his shop, and it happened just naturally as well. Over time, I think they've had over 200 or 300 babies. So it is happening. They're not being bred massively yet. For the hobby though, like in tanks, like there's no predictable way to do it or economically feasible way that's going to be cheaper than hiring locals to go collect the youngish ones that just appear in the spring, I believe. Let's see here. Oh, did I look into the fat sleep? Yes, I did look into more of the sleeper gobies. Super cool. Okay, so Jeff Kane wants to know if their club is on, if the Sacramento club is on YouTube. It is if you're a member, I believe, but you have to log in to their site. It's probably a private YouTube thing, unless someone else is streaming it. That would be my guess. But maybe you can talk to Luke. Yeah, sparkling gouramis like laying eggs under floating plants. Males will guard the area. Yeah, floating plants are the best for spawning killifish as well. Melissa Skinner said, yes, I agree, Melissa, totally. Killifish, summer substrate spawners. All my Galaris like laying in sand. Oh, interesting. Your blue Galaris lay in sand. Oh, you guys are already talking it out. Okay. All right, guys. Well, I am going to sign off. But again, all of you who are here, thank you. You guys rock, whether you're a member of the club today that I was speaking with out there in New Hampshire, or whether you're in Sacramento on our coast, the best coast, the West Coast. No. And wherever you are in the world, thank you for joining us today. And it's been a fun chat. I was happy to put this together, and I hope it was of some use to some of you. Thanks for watching, and check out other videos on the content. Any fish you're curious about, I might have a species profile already up. One of the almost 2,000 videos on this channel over the last 7 years. If I don't, leave a comment and let me know what you'd like to learn about. All right, guys, have a good one, and I will talk to you all later. Bye-bye.